2024 Faculty Senate meeting. Chris Elder is slightly delayed, so this is John Burke. I'm just going to sub in until she comes in to start and continue the Faculty Senate meeting. I just want everybody to have a chance to look at the agenda. Rick, would you post that, please, so everybody can see that? And Rick, can you scroll down, please, to show to where the meeting ends there at 4:15? Okay, thank you. Any modifications or changes to the agenda, please? I don't see any hands. Hearing none. All those in, well, I'll just move to that we approve the agenda as written because there were no changes. A second item on our agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. Everybody's had a chance to preview those. I'd like a motion is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the March meeting as written?
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second. Okay. All right. All those in favor, raise a digital hand, please. Or a physical hand, depending on what's easier for you. Thank you. Anybody does not approve them? Everybody can lower your hands. All right. Okay, the March 26, 2024 meeting minutes are approved. Moving on, Rick or Nancy, has Garnet Stokes joined us? I didn't see her earlier.
Yes, she's here.
Okay. So I know it's been a couple months, President Stokes, since you've attended to the Senate meeting. Glad that you're here today, and go ahead and present your report. We're just going to kind of put a little clock on there for 15 minutes just to kind of keep everybody on time, if that's acceptable to you.
Oh, I don't mind at all. I certainly don't expect to take that much time. I have a brief report and, no, maybe wanting to compress the provost and me to 15 minutes, that might be a bigger challenge.
That's not on the agenda. It's already approved. We can't change it.
Love it. Well, it is good to see everyone. And yeah, it does feel like it's been a while. I had to miss the last meeting, and I believe that the provost missed the last meeting as well. I thought I'd share with you a little bit about, well, I understand that Chris Elder described to all of you where we were. And I realize I'm not sure how much I've ever shared with the Senate, UNM's role in the Hispanic Serving Research Universities, but I don't even know for sure when it started, but it started with the then chancellor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, who saw real value in pulling together the Hispanic Serving Research Universities to try to deal with, to tackle the issue of bringing in more Latina leaders, Hispanic leaders into universities, leadership roles, and into government science roles. And it was broadly defined, but it was really about trying to diversify the leadership of academia and other entities, and believing that the research universities were in the best position to try to tackle that, because there have been a lot of efforts over the years, but we really haven't moved the needle very much. So there may be 22 Hispanic Serving Research Universities now. I do believe that New Mexico, UNM, was the first Hispanic Serving Research University, Research One University. These are all the Research One universities. But we have pulled together, we finally gotten ourselves organized, and this has been ongoing now for the last, I'd say at least the last 3 years. We had a conference in University of Texas, Arlington. The chancellor or president, I'm not sure which the title is there, her university received grant funding to sponsor a conference. So we took a contingent. I think we had more than 10 people from UNM that attended this conference to really tackle some of the issues that where the universities might be able to work together. And I know our own provost Ashley has been leading one of the proposed programs around postdocs. And so I will, you know, if he wants to share something with you about that. You know, what I want to say is, you know, our participation in this, I think, is important. It is a mechanism by which we can all work together, perhaps, and create collaborations across institutions that allow us to move the needle. And but we are pulling together everyone who went to that conference for kind of follow-ups. And, you know, I don't think that follow-up is yet on my calendar, but I did want this group to be aware of some of those ongoing efforts. I think the representation from, you know, various parts of the institution at that conference was, we had as many people there as anyone else did, probably. I was very pleased with the number of people who are invested in some things that we might do. So more to come. And I would also say my liaison for this particular, for working with HSRU is what we call them, is Asada Zarai. And so she kind of takes leadership and pulling everything together. And if it's something that the Senate is interested in, you know, I would kind of urge the possibility that she could come and give you a more thorough update about the activities that we are engaged in as part of this coalition or consortium. In terms of other things, you know, I don't know to what extent the Senate is aware that, you know, one of the major things the president of a university is supposed to do is help build private support for programs. And so, you know, I've been working with the foundation and some work has been ongoing now for some time. I think we're in our third year of what we call the silent phase of a comprehensive fundraising campaign. There's been a lot of work so far with deans and other leaders to figure out what our priorities should be. And there's still more work to be done, a whole lot more work. And so, but you'll be hearing more and more about this as time unfolds in the course of this silent phase of a fundraising campaign. It's an opportunity to try to build greater support. And we know that we have a lot of major initiatives, really important programs that if we are reliant on state funding or tuition alone, we really aren't able to do what we need to do to really create the excellence that, you know, that we aspire to as an institution. So, you know, a lot of this is around, you know, how do we build greater support for faculty? How do we build greater support for departments and for programs and for students and for staff? How do we really bring in the funding that we need to actually deal with the building, the capital funds? You know, UNM doesn't have a real strong history with fundraising around building projects, in part because the assumption is the state is going to provide all that funding. But our reality is, you know, there's a greater expectation all the time that we raise private support. And, you know, Harris Smith, who's, you know, our Dean of Fine Arts, has been actively engaged in fundraising for our Collaborative Arts and Technology Center. That's been a major focus of ours. And I'm doing a lot more travel now. Got back midnight last night from a trip to California to speak to some donors about our campaign. So I might look, my brain might be a little fuzzier than normal with all this travel. I don't know how you deal with travel, but I don't find it that much fun anymore. It's kind of hard. I've had too many delays. I'm kind of tired of sitting in airports, and I know some of you had that experience too. So anyway, but you know, this is an important thing for UNM's future. And so at some point, if you're interested as we develop the, the campaign itself. We'd love to have more conversation with this group about what it is we're doing. I will say too that I did want to mention, I guess since we last saw you, we've announced some student awards. We've had a luncheon in which we recognize service of people on campus. I saw a lot of people there. We actually had someone we were recognizing for 56 years of service at the University of New Mexico. And, someone else was like, I think was at 50, 51. We had a lot of people at, 30 and 35 and 25. And anyway, it's the first time we've been back in person for this event, which is kind of hard to imagine, but it was. And it was just great to see people and great to recognize the longevity of so many people in their, in their work for this institution. One of the things I wanted to just mention to you is when we talk about government relations and we talk about our budgets related to the legislative session, et cetera, and work with the governor, we often talk about something we call the RPSPs, the Research and Public Service Proposals. There have been a lot of changes with that I think we've mentioned to this group before. Typically this time of year, we would pursue, asking for proposals for research and public service projects. But with all of the changes that have taken place, we haven't really had much success at all with receiving funding for new projects. And so this year, what I expect we'll be doing is sending out a call for existing RPSPs for proposals for expansion of existing ones. And it is my plan to focus any new RPSPs on some of the big things that we're trying to achieve. So we're hoping to create, for example, an RPSP as a way of trying to get greater funding for support of faculty salaries. We're under a great deal of pressure for right-sizing the health sciences and the healthcare workforce in the state. We have a big project related to substance use disorders that we requested funding for, but didn't get it. And we're going to be working on the expansion of that. You might be aware that the governor vetoed something related to a proposed School of Public Health. We are actively working to resolve, what it is we need to do to move to have that be successful. And so there's been a lot of conversations behind the scenes and a lot more going on. And of course, there's really no end, it seems, to the number of things that we're really trying to promote. Our work for this next legislative session has really already begun. Because you can't afford not to be involved in this all year long. So, a lot more detail in the future, but I did want you to be aware of where we are at this point, and that there's a lot more to share over the coming weeks and months as we go in front of legislative committees and meet with members of the executive branch at the state level. We also have a lot of activity going on with our federal delegation as well. You might have seen something if you look at the Albuquerque Journal. Ben Ray Lujan, our senator, had been doing some work related to wildfires, and I think that was mentioned that will help serve New Mexico. So there's a lot that happens there, and I know some of you may be involved with some of the projects that are pursued. So there's a whole lot more I could say, but I want to make sure y'all have plenty of your time to do the work that I know you're engaged in. John, I don't know if your preference is to go ahead and let the provost speak and then have questions for both of us, because they often tend to overlap, but that's really your call, however you want to handle that.
I don't care whether the provost goes or we do questions now. How about go ahead and let's have the provost go ahead and do his report, and then we'll share the time at the end for questions. Provost Holloway?
Sure. Thanks, John, and thanks everyone as always for your time. So I'm going to actually kind of focus a lot of what I want to share on the Department of Education. But actually, let me start with just saying a little bit about enrollment. Because we're in that kind of period of time when we're looking at trying to figure out what's enrollment going to look like in the fall. Things mostly look like they're in a pretty good place. And so if we look at this time, today is the 12th day of pre-registration. If we look at today versus where we were about a year ago, we're about 10% up in student credit hours. That should not be heard as, oh, we'll have 10% enrollment increase in the fall. We won't. It's a reflection of having more students, which we did last fall. And so that's kind of already baked in. And it's also a reflection of getting students to register earlier, which is an important retention effort. Getting students registered leads to more likely retention. But all that to say, it's a positive sign about where we'll be in the fall. When we look at our incoming new students at the undergraduate level, we're also seeing more students have signed up for new student orientations this time this year than the comparable time last year. So these are positive signs that enrollment should show. Certainly no signal there that it would decrease, and some signal that it might be higher than it was last fall. So that's the good sign. But as I move into talking about the Department of Education, let me describe one of the bad signs. So some of you may know that the U.S. Congress required changes to the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for student financial aid that students fill out in order to get need-based financial aid, including Pell Aid. The changes that were mandated are good changes. They've simplified the form, reduced the number of questions. When the implementation was rolled out, there were a lot of problems with it. There were mistakes. There were, the folks who put together the online system that students and their parents used to fill this in did not account for certain kinds of circumstances, like if a parent didn't have a Social Security number. The ability of students to make corrections was not available. And so it's been a really rough rollout. Normally, we would have had good, solid information of FAFSA records, if you will, back in January. We're only just not quite having those good data now. And so all that to say that we're greatly delayed in packaging need-based financial aid. We expect to start packaging need-based financial aid next week. What we're doing right now is writing to students who had errors in their FAFSA and saying, you need to go back into the online Department of Education system and correct those errors. One of the things for us, because of the way we do aid, we really need to see all of our students together because we work very hard not to give out aid based on a first come, first served basis. And so we're trying to this week focus on getting about 700-800 students to correct errors in their FAFSA, some of which are trivial errors, but where in past years we could work with the student to correct those, now it can only be done through the new system. So again, all that to say, we're really late in packaging aid. We're not late compared to most universities. So about 30% of universities have just started packaging aid in the last week or so. No other university in New Mexico has started packaging need-based aid. It doesn't look like any university in New Mexico other than us is going to be ready to package need-based aid for about a month. So if we get going next week, we will actually be about a month ahead. One reason this is really important to us is because so many of our students have financial need, and they're making their decision whether to come to UNM based on what their financial aid package is, and they can't see it yet. And so that's why this is a concern. So it's great that we have more students signing up for orientation, but they're signing up not knowing what UNM is going to cost them out of pocket. And once they do know, it's possible some of them will say, no, can't do that. So again, it's good that the FAFSA was improved. Unfortunately, the implementation of it by the Department of Education was really problematic. And we're just now getting kind of past the problems. So that's one important thing going on with our friends, federal friends. Another is that the new Title IX regulations have just come out. And so as you probably know, Title IX regulations seem to change now with every change of administration. And they changed 4 or 5 years ago. They've just changed again. We have 1,600 pages of regulations and 100 days to revamp our processes to comply with them. So that's going to be a major push over the summer. There are good changes, we think, in the new regulations, and so they've made much clearer that Title IX legal protections do apply to LGBTQ communities, that they apply to pregnant students. The definition of sexual harassment has been expanded. The old standard was severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. And now it's unwelcome sex-based conduct. So that's really meant to be an expanded definition of what is sexual harassment. Most importantly, and we think a really good move, is that the previous set of Title IX rules said there must be a live hearing and you must allow cross-examination. And the problem with that is it's really an opportunity to re-traumatize victims. And so that live hearing requirement is being removed. And we think that's a good thing. We think that will result in more students being comfortable reporting and cases actually moving through more quickly. There's also there's a lot of changes. It's 1,600 pages of regulations. Two other changes I'll mention. One is that the regulations now set a standard, an evidentiary standard for all universities. In the past, universities had some flexibility in how they chose their evidentiary standard, leading to differences across institutions. And so there's some tightening of what evidentiary standard needs to be used. And the other piece that's important is that the regulations now much more clearly define who must report, to say that all employees with teaching or advising responsibilities are mandatory reporters. That's the standard most universities use now, but it's never been formally required. And so now that will be formally required as part of the federal regulations, that all teaching and those with teaching and advising responsibilities must report. So stay tuned on that as folks roll through on that. Again, it's a lot of work that our CEO office will have to do over the next 100 days or so to get those new regulations implemented here. And the final piece of Department of Education news that I want folks to start to know about is something called the Gainful Employment Rule. And so the Gainful Employment Rule has been around for probably a decade now, but it was very much targeted to for-profit institutions doing certain kinds of degrees. And so it was very much targeted towards for-profit institutions who are teaching cosmetology or teaching people to be barbers, those kinds of very specific professions. And it was put in place because students were taking out large loans for-profit institutions to get into these professions with unrealistic expectations about what their income might be. And so the feds put this rule in place again about a decade ago with that focus. They are now expanding it to all degree programs. And so we will be starting this summer reporting data to the Department of Education, basically about our students and what they graduated with and how much loan we'll be reporting who our students are, what they graduated with as far as a degree. That will be married up with federal loan and other Title IV financial aid data. And the that data will be used by the Department of Education to compute various financial metrics, debt to earnings ratio, for example, and they will publish those. And so there will be data published about every university that receives federal Title IV money at basically the degree level, the level of each degree and program. So bachelor's of history. This is the debt to earnings ratio of students who graduated from the University of New Mexico with a Bachelor of History, who had some kind of Title IV federal financial aid, or bachelor's in math, or PhD in math. So all degrees, all levels, there'll be this financial data on our graduates reported. And again, the feds can do this because they can marry up the records we give them of students who graduated and with what degree with federal tax data. And so that's kind of the core mechanism. And of course, they have records on federal student loans and those kinds of things. There's a lot of technical sort of details behind it, but the key thing for us is to start to be aware that it is really an expansion of the notion, whether we agree with the notion or not. It's an expansion of the notion that's out there that the purpose of higher education is employment and income, because it has the federal government publishing data on our graduates that kind of, that's focused on their income relative to what it costs them to get the degree. One last piece is that for graduate level programs, not undergraduate, but for graduate level programs in 2 years, if those financial metrics are low, there's going to be a requirement that students sign a statement saying they've seen the financial metrics. So if I graduate from if I get a master's degree in math, and a student getting a master's degree in math from the University of New Mexico has a high debt to earnings ratio, I'm going to have to sign a statement saying, yeah, I know that, in order to be part of that math program. So again, it's from the federal government perspective, it's meant to be about informing students, but it does really start to further and in my opinion, unfortunately, cement that notion that the purpose of higher education is earnings. And so that's happening now, and those data will start to come out kind of at that degree level. I will point out that the federal government already publishes data about debt to earnings ratio for every university. It's just not disaggregated by discipline, by degree, and now it will be. So that's my update on great doings at the Department of Education, and President and I are happy to take questions.
Go ahead, Roberta.
So thank you both for the presentation. President Stokes, you mentioned in your comments that we needed to, that you were interested in right-sizing the healthcare workforce. And most of the time in my career, when I've heard right-sizing, that means getting rid of people. It does not mean solving our shortage of healthcare professionals in the state.
Roberta, when she said that, I had exactly the same thought. Bad word choice.
Oh my
Bad word.
gosh. Oh my gosh. I would never, somebody gave me that word and I didn't even think it through, because you're right. That is exactly how I've heard it before. And I was kind of shocked, but that's the way it was presented to me. Oh, no. The right sizing is expansion. There is no question that what I've been asked to do from the board, because of, what we're hearing from the state, is to actually contemplate the gaps between what healthcare workers are produced in the state and what we actually need now and in the future. And there is not a category of healthcare worker at all where there's not a gap between current needs and future needs and what we're actually able to do. So thank you for calling me out on that. I will never use that phrase again. And okay.
Go ahead, Heather.
So this question is for anybody who could answer it, I suppose. And I know that these new Title IX guidelines are relatively new, but my concern is if an instructor or professor were to assign a book, let's say, that involves a lot of things of a sexual nature that students weren't expecting, under these new guidelines, could a student take an instructor to task over this? And if so, is there any language that we could perhaps put in our syllabi to warn students about such things in order to sort of perhaps mitigate these kinds of potential issues?
So Heather, thanks for the question, and we'll be sure to share that with the folks in CEO as they implement this. My sense is not that the expansion that's being described, because it's about conduct, I don't think that teaching about sexuality or reading, reading material, reading literature that has sexual content necessarily would fall within that. But we'll make sure we talk with the CEO folks as they plow through the 1,600 pages. That certainly was not the Department of Education's intent. And so thanks for asking the question so we can flag that with folks.
Sure, because just as an FYI, it's already happened under the guidelines that we have currently, where students try to, complain and raise issues and that kind of thing.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
Good to know.
if you're interested in learning more, we can talk later. I suppose we don't have to take up Senate time, but it's definitely happened, and it seems as if this could happen more with the new guidelines.
Yeah, I'll reach out because I wasn't aware of that.
I'd love to hear more too. I'll let the provost share with me, but thank you.
No, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the senators for the provost or the president today? Hearing none, seeing none. Thank you, Provost Holloway, President Stokes, for joining us today.
Thank
I
you.
will continue to sub in for Chris as long as possible until she arrives. So let's
John.
see what's next on our agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, it is Chris's report, but we could see if we could go ahead and look at the consent agenda items if the Senate wants to do that.
Senators, due to Chris not being here to deliver her report, can we move? Is there anybody opposed to moving forward to the consent agenda? I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to say yes or no. Hearing no objections, we will move on to the consent agenda. Rick, can you go ahead and post the curricular changes first, please, because those will be a little shorter list than the graduation candidates.
It looked like John Matthews had a hand up. I don't know if that was just me.
Did I miss him? It didn't pop up on my screen.
I was just agreeing. I didn't know how.
Okay. Thank you, Ezra. Thank you, John.
And John, we did have the one extra form that slipped in yesterday. And so I know Rick mentioned it, so hopefully people had a chance to look at that as well. But Chris allowed us to put it on the agendas.
And Rick, is this just one screen of the curricular changes?
Yes, this
Sure.
is it. This is
Okay.
all there is this month.
Yeah, sometimes there's two. Just wanted to double check.
Thank you.
All right. Since this is an action item, we need to go to a vote. Rick, do we have a poll for this already?
Yes,
do we
but you vote the consent items as a block.
Right. So we need, you're correct. Thank you for correcting me. Go ahead and let's scroll through how many degree candidates do we have for spring 2024? All right. And there we go. So there's the,
Do you want me to scroll through the actual list of graduates? Because I
No,
can
I-
do that.
yeah, I think that, but there's 3,000 of them. I think that's
Yes.
probably not pragmatic.
Okay.
I think it's better just to look at, so everybody can understand sort of what all the different degrees that UNM is going to offer for students who graduate in spring. And I would rather stay with the summary page right here. Okay, since everybody's had a chance to look at the summary page, not name by name. Rick, we have to do a poll because this is a block for the consent agenda. Would you please post the poll?
Okay, it's approved with 29-4 and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Rick. So everybody hears that the consent agenda for the curricular changes as well as the graduates for spring 2024 were approved by the Senate. Okay, any word from Chris yet, Rick?
No, I haven't seen her sign on yet.
Okay. Is Sheila Jernak with us today as we continue to move on?
She may not be on yet because I'm sure she was not expecting to come in quite this early. Let me check in and see where Chris is.
Okay. Right. And I know this calendar thing can sometimes be an issue because of trying to get spring breaks to match at different schools across the state or in Albuquerque. So give Sheila the chance to explain why she's where she is. And if she joins us soon, we'll be okay. If not, can we just suspend for 5 minutes, folks, while we see if we can get people together? Anybody opposed? Okay, let's resume at 3:45, please. So we can have the presentation and then we'll continue on. Thank you for reaching out to Sheila. Senators, let's go ahead and resume the meeting at 3:46 with the presentation from Registrar Sheila Jernak with regards to the 10-year calendar. Sheila, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much. Rick, are you able to display the slide that I had sent?
Yes, one moment.
Thank you. And I bring you all greetings today and good news because in 2025, the spring break for the University of New Mexico, the stars have aligned and the schedules have aligned, and we have the same spring break dates in 2025 that Albuquerque Public Schools have. You are looking at the proposed University of New Mexico 10-year academic calendar, at least I hope you are. The only addition or change to this calendar is the addition of the line at the bottom for the year 2034. I am asking for your approval of this amendment to the 10-year academic calendar, which will bring us current in our posting.
Are there any questions on this proposal? Hearing none, Rick, do we need a poll for this?
Oh, John Matthews has his hand up.
Oops, I missed him, sorry. Go, John Matthews.
Let's see, I'm trying to compare just 2029 and 2034. So 2034 starts a day later. And then spring break is 1 day shorter. Other things have shifted. So I'm wondering a little bit about that March 12th to 19th. Should it be 12th to 20th? Or something's funny.
Let me pull that just quickly here. One moment, if you will.
Well, those dates actually seem to follow the ones above. Then what's happening in 2029? Maybe it's 2029 that's wrong. Something's weird.
It may be 2029. Can I come back to you on that? It will require me to pull those calendars for those
Yeah.
years.
Anyway, thank you.
Yes. And I do beg your collective pardons. Nothing is handy when you need it to be. It's the 2029 year that seems to be the anomaly. What I would propose is the acceptance of the 2034, and I'll go back and take another look at 2029 and come back to the operations committee if I may.
There was a suggestion in the chat that it's really March 11 to March 18 for 2029.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
I don't remember who it was. Let me double check. Ping you, said it should be March 11 to March 18.
Okay. And with that correction, may I request your approval? It was the 2029 here.
Once again, modification to the slide as presented would say March 11 to March 18 for the spring break. Are there any other questions? Rick, is this a poll required item, please?
Yes. Yes. One moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, 26 approved, 27 approve, and 1 abstention.
Thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you, Rick. I'm just checking in. I see Chris Elder has joined us, so give me a chance to make sure she's ready to kind of revert in our agenda to the Faculty Senate President's Report, if she is ready to do so. Welcome, Chris. Glad
Thank
you're
you,
here.
John. Thank you. I will only do so as long as you continue moderating this meeting, facilitating, because I would appreciate it. So just really I just have one update to provide you all. So first, thank you all so much for your feedback during our last 2 meetings. I did meet with Pamela Cheek and Kate Lippett, our colleague in, I'm going to mess it up, geography. And she is heading the Teaching Enhancement Committee. Kate is chairing the Teaching Enhancement Committee. So I met with her, Pamela Cheek, the 3 of us. And then I also attended the Teaching Enhancement Committee meeting following that, and we talked about your feedback, and we're going to enlist the Teaching Enhancement Committee to do some of that work. I'm also, those of you who replied to me directly, am inviting you to participate. So I appreciate those of you on the Faculty Senate who showed interest and reached out to me directly. So I'm going to be putting you in touch with that group as well. And also I wanted to let you know, I think I mentioned this previously, that I'm working on pursuing how we can acquire paid family medical leave, not just for ill loved ones, but also for those of us who are primary caretakers of those ill loved ones. I think you might have heard or might know, and Satya, maybe back me up on this. I believe it was voted down this last legislation session to offer paid medical leave. Is that right, Satya?
Yes, it failed in the legislative session.
Yeah. I just want everybody to know too that Satya Witt, she does a lot of work for all of us at UNM, and particularly faculty, on making sure that our concerns are heard up in Santa Fe at the round table, especially during the legislation session. So I want to give Satya a big shout out and kudos and thank you for all of that work that she does on our behalf. I also just wanted to mention that I think I've mentioned to some of you, this is on a personal level. I moved my mom out to New Mexico from California it's almost a year ago, middle of May, and then moved her into an independent living. And I've since had to move her into a memory care unit, and I've looked at different kinds of places, different levels of care. And so I just wanted to offer to anyone here, if you find yourself in need of something like that for your family or a loved one, please reach out to me, because I've done so much research on this. So I'd be happy to be a resource for you. And I just want to tell you, again, a personal note, maybe just a matter of serendipity. I was on my way to a conference. Are you okay? Here, do you want to drink that? I was on my way to a conference in Tampa, and the plane was absolutely packed, and it happened to be flying Southwest. So you know how we all, if you're taking Southwest, you're hoping you get an aisle seat or a window at least, or, and the plane was so packed, you just know you're going to be sitting, all squished in. Everybody gets on. I sit down in my row, in my aisle seat, and there's a woman sitting in the window seat, and all of a sudden the plane doors close, and it's probably the only aisle with a seat left available in the middle. And so, she and I start talking. She's from Albuquerque. She's in the healthcare industry. And the reason why she's flying through Atlanta is to get to North Carolina for her mother's funeral. And her mother is following us on another plane. But, her mother was in hospice for 2 years, and she went through, moved her mom to New Mexico, and, she just started talking to me. And so we just started, she's sort of further along in this healthcare process. But it just was such an incredible, it was so serendipitous for me, that somebody who had just gone through this whole process, ends up sitting on the plane next to me, and there's nobody between us. Otherwise, we never would have spoken, right? And then when I get back to Albuquerque, of course, we met up for lunch. But maybe it's my old age. I'm just getting so sentimental and sharing sharing this all with you guys. But so I hope if there are any of you who are experiencing this kind of thing, I hope you'll reach out to me, because it's really nice to have resources and people who have gone through the experience to go through it with you. Okay, so I think that's it for my president's report, other than If you haven't already, sign up for a committee appointment if you need a new one, and I'll resend out that link. Anything else, Nancy? Otherwise, Rick,
We
if you
need to
could.
talk about nominations for president-elect and the ops committee.
So I hope those of you who are senators will please consider running for president-elect. This coming academic year 24-25, I'll be faculty senate president for one more year. It's a faculty senate president. It's I think I've mentioned it's a 3-year commitment. You know, president-elect, you learn the ropes, faculty senate president, and then past president in order to help with continuity. So I hope you will consider running, as I mentioned before, and the only requirement is that you be a senator. So no matter which campus you're on, no matter what your, you know, lecturer, tenure track, tenured HSC, you're eligible. And if you recall, it's there are different compensations for the different levels. And somebody from HSC, I remember who, I'm just, in case they don't want to be identified, asked me a really great question last time, and that is, how are HSC folk compensated? Because especially for those who are teaching classes regularly, you know, you get a 1-1 teaching reduction plus $10,000 for faculty senate president, $5,000 for president-elect, and a 1-course teaching reduction for the year. And then past president is a SAC of $5,000 or a course release. And so the person from HSC asked me, well, you know, for those of us who maybe the course releases wouldn't really apply to them, I'd like HSC members to reach out to me and I can talk to the provost about it, because Finney before me, you know, has worked really hard to make sure that the compensation is fair. Mind you, you know, Finney didn't benefit from the work that he did to make sure that position was fairly compensated. And then I did some additional work in order to ensure that fair compensation. Ezra, I see you ask, is that past president in perpetuity? Finney's already trying to get out of it, and he's past president right now. See, he doesn't even turn his camera. Oh, he does have his camera on. Okay. But officially, just for yeah, it would be nice, right, if we all continued to receive our SACs into perpetuity, right? As used to be the case for some positions, but yeah, so it's just for the year, meaning the compensation is just for that year. So Roberta, I'm sorry, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Oh, I just wanted you to give us a timeline on when these nominations or running for a committee or faculty senate president or whatever. What's the timeline of you needing this?
Nancy, can you help me with that? What's the timeline for?
Oh, yeah, sorry. We can put out the call for nominations, and then we'd like to run the elections before the end of the semester. So Chris and I have not mapped that timeline out, but we can put a call out tomorrow, Chris. And if people will let us know by Friday, then we can get things ready and run an election next week. So.
And you'll have a little bit more time to sign up for the appointments, for the committee appointments. And really what I've been doing is You know, with our first round of committee appointments, I think 45 people responded, which, as you all know, isn't nearly enough for what we need. But I do like to appoint people to the committees, you know, their first choices, especially if they responded first. And so then I'll do that, and then and then I'll send out another call and ask for more people to respond. So, you know, it's mostly first come, first serve. There are some committee positions, though, you know, based on the faculty handbook. You know, we have to make sure that we have branch campus representation. We have to make sure that different disciplines on different committees have representation. We have to make sure that faculty of different ranks have representation. We have to make sure HSC has representation, right? So sometimes people don't get their first choice on the committee if, for example, you know, we have one slot open for architecture and planning, then of course I need to fill it with somebody from that discipline first. But really, that's how the committee appointments go. Or, you know, maybe I know something about someone, you know, somebody who won a past teaching award or something, and I think will be a great fit for the teaching enhancement committee, that kind of thing. I also, Roberta, does that answer your question? Okay. So I also want to be sure to thank all of you, all of the senators, because I know that, you know, meeting here each month and also doing the work that you're doing on committees, reporting back to your colleagues in your programs and departments, that is oftentimes uncompensated or invisible labor. And so I really value the opportunity to get to work with all of you and work with faculty across the disciplines. It's, you know, one of the reasons why I participate in the Faculty Senate. And of course, in addition to the senators, those of our colleagues who are serving on those committees and doing the important work of the committees, because I really think that's where we faculty have the most influence and the most important influence when it comes to policy and working with the administration. So I'm not signing off. I just want to say I'm glad you're all here, and thank you so much for making it to this April meeting. It will be our last for this academic year. But thank you for being here during this very busy time. So I'll stop there. And Nancy, Rick, can you tell me what's next on our agenda? Nancy.
Public comment. And then adjournment.
Okay. Nancy, you have your hand up. I forgot ops, right?
Nancy, you're muted.
I just wanted to mention for ops, we need 4 members for ops in addition to the president-elect who we will elect, and then the president. But since we have a president and past president, we'll actually need 5 who are the same person. We'll need 5 members to elect for ops this time. So so we'll put all of that in an email and get that sent out tomorrow, and I hope that you will consider, and the individuals we will send those to the individuals who are coming on to Faculty Senate as well for the next one, because it is their Faculty Senate who will be doing the election. So,
and just to remind you all, so ops, or the operations committee, I think as Finney always explained it to me, is the committee on committees. So basically, we oversee, or, you know, or sometimes just get out of the way, honestly, of the work of various committees. And we also set the agenda for the Faculty Senate meetings, try to make sure that what is coming to you during this time, during your valuable time, is relevant for faculty, for the Senate. And I don't know, John Matthews, John Burke, Finney, any other Sever, Kodru, any other current operations members, do you want to say anything in terms of inviting people to think about running for the operations committee? Don't make me look bad, guys.
Chris, I'll chime in if you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So I've lost count of how many operations committees I've worked with. And they've all been really fine groups. And the ops committee is what makes being faculty senate president like doable. Without that group of people, it's just not possible. One, to get the work done, but also to be able to share ideas and get it, and just, to have colleagues that are that have your back. So I highly recommend folk to join an ops. As I would say to Nancy and Rick from time to time, it's rare that you look forward to a meeting, an administrative meeting, and I always look forward to my ops committee meetings. And well, I want to be completely truthful. As faculty senate president, I always look forward to my ops meetings. Is that fair, Nancy?
Nancy, can you mute Finney for me, please?
He
Yeah.
looks forward to them now too, because he doesn't have to do a lot, right?
No, I've enjoyed working with this group. This has been a great group, and a lot of, most of the ops team carried over, and so I know Chris is going to have a lot of thanks to give to you to ops, probably before we close the meeting or in another spot. But this will be the last time that you guys will see me, and I'm so proud to have had a chance to serve as faculty senate president and past president. And I highly recommend it. It's one of the toughest assignments that I've had as a faculty member here at UNM, but easily one of the most rewarding, if not the most rewarding. And you get to meet people like Caroline Scruggs and other folk along the way who make, you learn so much from your colleagues, people like Ezra. So I've been very appreciative of the time, and especially if you have a chance to work with Sever on something, it's always great. So ops has just been wonderful. I get every single person that I've worked with, Kodru, John, and John. I mean, it's just been wonderful. So I'm highly recommend it, and we need it. We can't sit on our hands. This is a very important time in our university's history, very important time in faculty governance. And, it's time for, a new team to step up and do the work. And Chris, you've been great faculty senate president. Very, very good job this year.
He almost forgot me. I'm just kidding. I will say, just to add to what Finney said, I have learned so much more about what's happening on North Campus, with HSC, and I've really valued that. I really appreciate that. And Finney, I'll just say, I thank you. Thank you for taking me under your wing and mentoring me as a faculty senate president. And I'll just say, though, you probably all know that Finney and I are in the same department, but we've never worked as closely as we have through faculty senate. And, I really consider Finney, a close friend now, somebody who I can turn to about anything. And that wouldn't be the case if we hadn't have worked so closely together in ops, so, and the Senate, so I appreciate that. Kate Cartwright, one of the first people I ever met at UNM.
Hello, thanks. And yes, thanks to everyone. I have one question. I looked and I had to join late, so I apologize if I missed this earlier. I saw there were still numerous empty seats in the arts and sciences bucket, and I didn't know if there was a plan for that or if I'm supposed to volunteer a bunch of colleagues. So,
I can respond, and Chris, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to talk, but I know that when they had their election, they did it like back in November, and they only had a few people that responded, so they filled the spots they could. I have had some conversations with Associate Dean Judy Bieber about it, and Karen Roberts, and encourage them to please try to fill those seats. So it is the college's role to fill. It's the College of Arts and Sciences that need to fill those seats. Faculty Senate can't do it. So if you have some encouragement, I would please.
okay, thank you.
Rick, we have one item remaining on our agenda still. Any other comments about operations or committee service?
I guess I'll just say something real quick. Everybody said such great things about ops. I can't believe how fast the year went. It seems like I just joined yesterday, and this is our last meeting, of the Faculty Senate, but also ops met fairly intensively sometimes. And it's really, really important because that's the committee that sets the agenda for what the Faculty Senate will do. And with Chris's leadership and all kinds of great ideas, what's really great about ops, we speak so freely and, brainstorm, and there's no fear. This is what academic discourse should be, and that's what faculty governance should be. So I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to serve. When the ballots go out, you may see my name again. I have no idea, but it was truly a great opportunity. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat, Chris.
Amaris, do you mean the committee appointments?
Yeah, I'll come on camera for this. Yeah, so like I'm the chair of the Student Publications Board. But on that, I am actually the presidential appointee, but there are Faculty Senate representatives, but that, like the Student Publications Board, KUNM Board, those often aren't on the list. And so people can't volunteer. So like the board has to find volunteers. But
Yeah.
Is it still ops then that we need to contact about that?
Actually, that's a great question. And so I did appoint the people to the KUNM board, including myself. And as far as I understand, there's the editorial board, for example, for UNM Press. And for some reason, correct me if I'm wrong, Finney and Nancy, but Faculty Senate does not appoint that board, correct? But Faculty Senate representation on various committees is appointed by the president. Usually it's the president-elect who's doing that work.
For those boards that aren't Faculty Senate, underneath the Faculty Senate, I think they just usually reach out to the Faculty Senate president or president-elect, and then they work on getting a representative for them. So
Yeah, that's right. And actually that's how KUNM happened. They reached out to me because they needed one more person, and then when Douglas Fisher cycled off, then I appointed another faculty member. Yeah, so let me know if any of you are interested. Sever now has joined KUNM, and he just reached out to me and said he's always wanted to do it and he's never gotten the opportunity. And I said, well, Sever, now's your chance.
And we do have a way to add that onto the other committees onto the preference survey if we need to. So if there is some openings, let us know and I can work with Chris and because I know we can add those on if there's going to be some openings for those.
Great question, Amaris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate every senator who's going off of the Senate as well. We appreciate all their work. And so, thank you.
I'll hand it back over to you, John Burke.
I think I would be remiss without thanking Nancy and Rick for everything that happens behind the scenes, such as Zoom links, meeting minutes, treats for our meeting in March, and all those other things that we sometimes may take for granted. But I want to make a very, very public thank you to Rick and Nancy for all their help for not just the Senate, but all the different Senate councils and committees.
Here, John.
Okay.
And helping me get through these, like make sure I don't completely mess up when I'm facilitating. I should really say co-facilitating these meetings.
Right. Rick, do we have, since I think our agenda is exhausted except for public comment, do we have any public comment today?
No, there is not.
Okay. Chris, do you want to sign us off for the end of the year or you want me to do it? She's pointing at me. All right. At this point, our agenda is exhausted. The meeting is adjourned. I want to thank Chris again and everybody else for attending, and we'll see everybody in August.